Hi guys, today I wanted to talk to you about installing a DRO on a milling machine. In my case it's a Schaublin 22. I bought this machine a couple of years ago but had it in storage until my new workshop was finished. So I only installed it here recently, about 2 or 3 months ago, and finally getting to know the machine. When I bought it there was no DRO included, and I always wanted to have one because most of my other machines nowadays have a DRO, and I think on a milling machine it's really handy to have one. It just helps you being faster, it's easier work if you have a DRO. For example, you can drill hole patterns more easily. If you have 3-hole, 5-hole patterns, you can just type it in the DRO and it basically gives you the position where you can go to and to drive to the right point instead of measuring it. And what is also nice, that if you're doing several features on a machine, you can just basically set a starting point and then go from there, and you don't always have to count on the hand wheels if you're going like further directions, going back, going forward, going to the next point. And sometimes, at least in my opinion, sometimes I got lost and then I probably have to measure again, going back again, and in this case the DRO just helps you out a lot. And of course all the other stuff, if you're want to do a precise slotting, milling, do a milling just some millimeters away from something, you can just basically zero out the DRO and it does the rest for you. So it's really a neat tool. Before I'm just going further on how to install it, and in my case what to look out for, I'm just gonna give you a quick tour on the machine, how the axis is working. In my case the Schaublin 22 is a RAM style machine. That means that for the Y-axis you're moving the complete head front to back. Here you can see, if I'm using the hand wheel, I can crank the whole head from front to back. And the travel on this machine is quite long. It's around 400 millimeters approximately, and this gives you quite a long travel. It's still some adjustment for me because my other machines are using an XY table, and in this case it's a little bit different workflow, but I'm getting used to it now. So X and Z is operated with this lever, but of course you can always use the hand wheel as well if you're gonna have to do just a minimal adjustment. But the machine is basically built to use the handle here. And you also have the rabbit function, so if you push it in and then move the axis, you can rabbit. I think it's 10 times speed, so it's moving really fast. That's especially neat if you have to move the table up and down, especially if you're changing some workpiece or you have to take a look and take a measurement. You can just basically run it up and down, and it's quite neat. You don't have to use the hand wheel anymore because the table is still quite heavy. There are 2 motors for the feed rate, and so it's quite heavy to use it by hand. Here you can see, for demonstration purposes, a DRO installed on another milling machine of mine. Here's the scale for the X-axis, and in the back you can see the scale for the Z-axis for the table. You can see on the right there is the display with 3 axes for X, Y, and Z. And I just zeroed them out for you to make it more illustrative. And if I'm now moving one of the axes, you can see that they are always counting up or down depending in which direction I'm going. Here you can see the DRO that I bought for the Schaublin mill. It's a cheap version from China, and basically, as you can see, it's probably similar to the one that on the other machine. It has 3 axis display readout. This is the arm and the accessories for the holder. So they are all more or less the same design, so to speak. Here you can see the scales that also came with the set. I debated with myself for quite some time which DRO I should use on the Schaublin. The Schaublin is a very, very nice machine, and some people might think you shouldn't put like that cheap DRO on the Schaublin because it's somehow a waste. At the end of the day, it's always about money. If you are able to justify the investment, and in my case, because I use the machine for hobby usage only, investing in a very expensive DRO just wouldn't pay off. At least that's how I think. I mean, I was looking at the Heidenhain solution that I originally shipped as an option. It's the VRC 760 plus the Heidenhain scales, but there are several problems arise with this solution. First of all, it's around 30 years old at least, so I'm not so worried about the scales, but more or less about the electronics in the DRO itself, because after 30 years I've seen a lot of electronic go bad, and troubleshooting them is a nightmare, and they are really expensive. So even the used DRO is for the display alone 500 to 600 euros. Next point is availability. The scales in the size that I need are also really hard to find. I wasn't actually looking if you could use new ones with a display, because new ones are even more expensive, and you're probably looking at an investment for around 2,500, 3,000 euro, depending on what kind of scale and quality you want from Heidenhain. I mean, if you buy a 50,000, 60,000 euro machine, that's probably fine, but for the things I do, I just wanted to go a lot cheaper. So this set here costs around, I think, more or less 300 euro, including taxes and shipping and all that, and that's very reasonable priced. The reason I went with this one is that it got very good reviews from other users, and at the end of the day, for me, it was just a decision if I use a DRO or not. And even let's say not so precise unit as a Heidenhain will probably much better for me than just using the hand wheels. So I think it's an upgrade, even though the scales probably can never be measured with a Heidenhain. I mean, that's obvious. It's less than 10 times the price, so you can't expect the full 100% of the quality. What I did was I ordered them in 1 micron solution. You can see it here. At least that's what I printed on it. I hope it's real like that. At the end of the day, it's just the resolution, mind you. It's not that the scale is actually accurate to 1 micron. Even the Heidenhain scales, the best ones out there, are rated to plus minus 2 micron in accuracy. So it's basically just a resolution that your display can show, but it's not really the scale. Usually I got some other ones on the machine from Sino. They rate them with plus minus 3, plus minus 4, depending on what kind of scale and what length you're buying. So that's probably what you have to think about. And honestly, even if it's plus minus 6 or 8 micron, that's way good enough for the things I do. So I don't really care about that. Another point was that the scale size was not critical. On the other hand, on my line and lathe, I had to use very small and thin scales. because there was no space on the top slide and the cross slide and all that. But here at the end of the day, this thing could even be bigger, and I wouldn't mind. I'm not gonna get paid from them, it's just that I wanted to show you my opinion here, and if it's crap, I'm gonna tell you. So. In the box were also some mounting accessories. This is casted aluminium, some brackets and all the screws. I'm probably not gonna use the brackets. I don't really need them for the installation I do. But obviously if you have a very round machine with a lot of corners, and they might help you. But you can also build something like that in probably 5 minutes, so it's not a big deal. Here you can see the reading unit, the head in close-up. What I did not include was screws, so it's still wobbling around. Usually it should be, the red one is the transportation protection. It should be screwed there firmly and level, but it's no problem. I just move it like that, and you can see that's basically the head moving on the scale. The scale has some protection here, so it's only like open it a little bit for reading and then it's closed again, the slip. I don't know how good it will seal, but usually I try to mount them away from the chip, so that shouldn't be a problem. Just to give you an indication how this works, basically the reading head is running around a very fine lined scale, like a ruler. The head is reading the lines and gives you a difference how far it moved. But what you really have to keep in mind, at least in this price range, none of the scales are closed loop. So if I power off the machine and do that, crank the hand wheel, or someone accidentally, even if there's someone bumps into the wheel or something, your scale will be off. So if you switch it on again, your scale will show exactly the same value that you had before powering it off, and you will not notice the difference where you move. So you always have to re-zero it and start from there. So it's not like you can power it off and work again on the same spot. I mean, you can, but you really have to be careful not to move the machine, otherwise you will be off. What you have to be mindful about is what kind of length you're ordering for the scales. Usually every manufacturer gives you like a drawing where you can see what kind of dimension you need in order to get the result you want. In my case, I have to add 142 millimeters to my travel length to get the actual length of the scales that I'm ordering. So this one here is for the, let me just check, for the Z-axis, and so the total length of the scale is 450 millimeter, and I have to deduct 142 millimeter, and that's my actual travel size. And why is that? I mean, it's quite obvious. If you look at this here, the head, if you just say that's the midpoint, you can see the head can't travel. If at that point the reading is done, you can't move that one all this way to the side, because then the head has to move outside the scale. So there is also some room that the head actually needs to travel. So in this direction, they need left and right around 70 millimeters for the head. And what is my tip here is always, if you have the space, give it a little bit more buffer here. At least here, I wouldn't never drive my head further than that, just to be sure. Maybe if your machine has drops a little bit, or you can crank the Z-axis down even a little further. This always can happen, and if you crank it too far, you will break the scale. That's really you really wouldn't be angry about that. So just plan it in advance, make sure that the scale is long enough. In my case, it was not that crucial. As you can see, the scales are quite long that I ordered. Basically, that's just because the machine has very flat surfaces, and the longer scale should give me a little bit more wiggle room to install it. I wouldn't have need this kind of length anyway. I just ordered them longer because they're all at the same price, so it wouldn't really matter. So the length was not an issue here. Some manufacturers charge you for extra length, so there's no need to buy an extra 200 millimeter if you don't need it, obviously. But you also have to be mindful is how to mount the scale on the machine. You can either mount it the moving part, the actual scale to the machine, and then the head is moving with the, let's say, with the x-axis, or you can also mount the head to the machine and the scale is moving with the axis. I always would recommend, for obvious reasons, that you let the head stay the fixed version and move the scale, because then the cable size is fixed. You can wire the cable along your machine and just the scale is moving. On my lathe, I did not have that option, so I had to make some adjustments. Let the cable be long enough, otherwise you rip it apart if you go to one extreme or the other. Just one final thought before we are moving to the machine. Also be mindful where you can install your head, because you will only get the full travel length if your head is in the middle. So let's say like this, then you can move half and half of the distance to each side. But if I install, my table is in the middle, but I install my head like this, as you can see, the travel to the left side will be very limited. So make sure you factor that in. In this case, if your head needs to be positioned off center, you have to adjust the scale length. In some cases, maybe there's a coolant going through there, or there is an end stop or something that is in the way of the scale, so you can't mount it in the right position. So it just have to be adjusted as well. What I totally forgot to tell you is it obviously makes sense to test the scales before they are installed, and in my case you can see they're working fine. You can set the resolution on the DRO on the display itself, so even if you have 1 micron scales or resolution with 1 micron on the scales, you can set a display to 5 micron if you don't want to have it that fluctuate. As you can see here, I barely touch it and it's moving. And on some machines you can see that will also happen in usage. For example, if you clamp the table down and just touch it a little bit, it might move on you. And some people drive that crazy, so you can change the resolution. And on this display, it's the same as on most others. You press the point button while powering it on, and then it goes into menu. And then you can see here it says resolute, and I put it on 1 micron. I just wanted to test it. Maybe if it drives me crazy, I go back to 5 micron. But just for the tests, I use it at 1. Leave it at 1. Now we are over on the machine and actually talking about installing the scales. I decided to start with the y-axis because basically, as you can see, the Schaublin is just one straight parallel line and it's all rectangular. So all I have to do is drill some holes here, mount it like this, and then I'm gonna mill some bracket and go from here. I will adjust it in the slot, and then the head will be positioned somewhere here. But in this case, you can see what I was talking about earlier. You could use mount like that, and then the head of the readout would move in together with the head of the machine, but then the cable would always be dragged around, and even they are protected, I would not recommend that, at least in this case. And plus, on the plus side, for my installation method, that here you can see the open side is also facing upwards, so the chip can fly in. And if you mount it like that, there's probably no way that there will be ever chips go inside. They include some covers for the scales, but they're like this big and make it very bulky, and I decided not to use them. What you can also see was what I was talking about earlier, that where to position the head in respective to the rest of the travel. I'm gonna move the machine to 20 millimeters. That's approximately the midpoint of the travel, and I want all this part to be untouched here. So I want the head to be more mounted like here. So just move it a little bit like this. Hold it a little bit because You will see if I move it all the way there, I will not have enough travel. So the transportation thing here is very annoying. On other scales it actually fixes it and you can move it with together the scale, but here it's just basically a bracket that holds the head in place, so it's a little bit difficult for me to show it on camera. But what I wanted to say is that even though we are on midpoint of the machine, I have to install the head off center. In my case, I measured it. That's why I bought the scales longer than needed. So I have an asymmetrical way in this direction. Otherwise, I would have needed to mount the head somewhere here, and that's not what I wanted. But obviously, you can do that. That's just in my case. It's just I always like to be minimally invasive on the machine, so I don't want to drill several holes and just mount everything or plug everything. And even though I will never need this, I don't want to just build over it. So I want to keep it as clean as possible in my case. Maybe I'm pointing out the obvious, but here you can see how the position of the head in respective to the scale would influence the actual travel size. Here it's approximately on midpoint, a little bit further back, but if the head would be here, I only had around 20 centimeters of full length in this direction, but more on the other one. And one point to find out how much travel I had is just easy. You make a marker with a pen, just travel all the way front and back and where you want to position your head, like that for example, and then you just will measure the distance if it's enough for your scale or not. What is neat about the scales, and I just discovered that actually while looking at them, that the whole pattern is symmetrical, so it's recessed on both sides. You can mount it from this side or from the other side. On some of the Sino scales, especially smaller ones, the recess for the screws is only on one side. So either your screws are standing up, but then you can't standing out. Then you can't mount their cover that they're providing, or you have to do your own design. And in this case, I'm gonna mount it this way because the cable of the head can go back and around the machine. It's not hanging out in front. And that's how I plan to mount it. Obviously, the scale is coming up here, and I'm going to mount a little bracket for the head. And on the head, it's also quite neat. I think it's M5 threads in there, but you can also obviously use M4 screws and just bolt it to the bracket behind. So the bracket will have the threading and you just bolt it through. Or you can, in my case, I could also use a bracket from the front and bolt it through and use the thread of the head. So it's quite neat, it gives you a lot of possibilities. So I'm going to use 5mm screws because that's what fit best to the scale. So I'm drilling manually with the drill 4.2mm hole, and then I just tap it also by hand. It's most likely cast iron, but you never know, it's Schaublin. Who knows what I did to this machine? I'm not really sure. I hope it's cast iron because that would drill and tap pretty nicely. Here you can see I drilled and tapped the holes off camera, and I just mounted a scale for display purposes. Obviously I have to take it down again for probably installing the head, and that's where my head position will be. And I just line it up. It's not really perfect, but the things aren't that accurate either. So you can see it's 0, 0. But I will, when I do the final installation, I will indicate it in with the indicator, so it's perfectly aligned to the machine. Here just one shot to show you what I meant earlier with the mounting position of the head. Now I moved the machine head all the way back to the front. You can see there's a hard stop here where it hit the machine. And that's one of those cases. Just imagine this thing is going to pop off for some reason, and you just travel it with the head 1 centimeter too far, and you will rip off your head and just probably shoot it right out of the back of the scale. So So I decided to mount the head like here, so I always have like, this is my safety distance for the travel of the machine. If that's obvious to you, just skip forward in the video and you can see the next axis. Now what I have to do next is that I will mill some bracket. Basically more or less something like this. Maybe I actually gonna use the one they provided, but it's more or less going to look like this. I drill the holes, mount the head here, I make some adjustments to mount it on the slot here. Here's another quick shot with the head traveling in the other direction. So just imagine the head of the scale will stay here and the head of the machine is moving further back, and I have plenty of space here as travel. In this case, I'm only using it as a vertical mill anyway, so to make use of the whole travel space, you will have to flip the head, then it can travel backwards. Otherwise, you see, I would hit, at some point I would hit, with a spindle, hit the machine. So it's only can travel the full way back if it's tilted this way for horizontal milling, but I rarely do that on this machine anyway, so I could have gone by with a much smaller scale if that's what I'm looking after. Here are the covers they provided, and honestly I have to say I like the Xeno ones much better, because the Xeno ones have like a mounting bracket from aluminium behind, and then you can just mount it to the bracket. In this case this is just basically some kind of extrusion. I don't know how they want, basically just pop it up there, but you have to drill some holes here, and I'm not really sure if I'm gonna mount it. I mean, seeing it like this, it's not that bulky anymore, and the head would have a little protection, but then again I have to make sure that my bracket is not is fitting under there, and I don't know how much space I have there. It's probably 1 centimeter, so that wouldn't be that big issue, but we will see. I'm not sure yet. But to be honest, I'm not very keen on drilling more holes than necessary in the machine to fix this thing here, so it's not really what I was looking for. Before finalizing on the Y-axis bracket, I was actually thinking about how to mount the display unit, and I almost made a mistake because I did not realize that the RAM head style is moving, because all the other machines I just mounted somewhere there and it's fixed. So I took a look at the pictures of machines out there that actually came with a DRO or installed one, and what I quickly realized is that I need some clearance here to mount the holder. Usually they're just mounted here in this case, but somewhere here. But as I saw flipping it here, you can see I have almost no clearance to the wheel. It was really annoying. So I must like that I need at least So what I'm gathered is that I need at least this amount of clearance height-wise that I can what I gathered is that I need at least this amount of clearance to use the wheel and not be annoyed by always hitting it. What I came up with, I saw that the original one was actually using a round holder. And I don't know, I kind of like the idea to just mill that one parallel and mount it like that, and then I mount it like that to the round aluminium. Then I always have the possibility to tilt it a little bit this way or this way, which would shorten or lengthen the arm if I'm not happy with the position, so it's not really that fixed. And the one big plus point, from what I saw in the video, they mounted it here, so the chance is pretty good that I'm not threading into some gearbox or something, because that would really be also very unfortunate. I have to change the jaws, otherwise I will not fit the 80mm diameter material in the chuck. Off camera, I sawed off the rest of the part basically because it was almost 4 centimeters and I didn't want to waste it. And on the other hand, I also would have trouble parting it off because my parting tools are usually only 3 centimeters, 3.5. So it would have been a tight thing. So I just sawed it off, and then I'm now gonna clean it and drill it from the other side. Alright, this is the result. I drilled and tapped the holes M5 off camera, and basically all that is left is to drill, hold the machine, thread it, and then I can mount the scale, and that's how the arm is going to go there. And one advantage is I can always turn this around, so I can adjust this angle here afterwards, or make it longer if I need to. So in extreme cases I can also mount it like this, so it's getting shorter, because I don't know yet how the usage for the wheel will be, so I can basically just adjust it a little bit, and also, as you can see here. Alright, but I have to order an M10 bolt because it's almost, I think, 120mm long, and I don't have one like in this size, so I have to wait for that. But in the meantime, I'm gonna finish the other scales. For the y-axis, I finally decided to use the angle block that they provided. Basically just because it's a perfect fit, and all I have to do is widen the slots a little bit, and that's it. So even if I would mill it myself, it probably would look almost the same, so I don't think it's an issue using it. I widen the slots, and since this is a right angle, if I'm now going to tighten the head should self-align perpendicular to the scale and to the bottom bed of the machine here. So I'm just tightening it slightly. That's aligning the head, and I'm still can move that around. And once I find the final position, I just try to line it up here to make it look nice. I'm gonna scribe the lines on the machine, drill and tap the holes here, and then I can finally mount the head. And we're done with the axis. I manually drilled the holes, and now I'm just tapping them by hand and 5mm thread. I removed the transportation protection and aligned the head by eye. I'm calling it good enough for now, and I will do the final alignment at the end, but I just want to move forward to the next axis. I hooked it up just holding the display here, and then you can see just put it in X. Usually, obviously it would be Y, but you can see here if I'm turning the hand wheel, the scale is moving, and then you see in the display the movement. And what you can see here, that's basically all it's about. I have some backlash here, and you see I'm turning the hand wheel, and that's the backlash, and the axis on the display is not moving at all. So that's basically what's the main advantage of the DRO. You don't have to worry about backlash anymore. You just position the machine to the actual movement of the ways, not on the hand wheels, and see if going back, taking out the backlash coming from front. Obviously now I don't have any backlash in this direction, so it would show the whole distance. While I'm on this side, I'm gonna mount, at least drill the hole for the mount. And as a little tip, I'm using a 10.5mm pin. That's exactly the hole size I drilled, so I just can align the pin and measure the distance that where I want it, and then I just hit it with the hammer so that I have a light stand for the starting point of the drill. This way I'm not have any alignment issue, because going through all this distance with a penner, so you probably might screw it in one way or the other. So this way it's pretty centered point where I want it. Hopefully there's nothing down there when I'm drilling into. Basically I choose this point because the original mount was also roughly here. I don't have to drill that deep, just 10mm is way good enough, just to get a little bit of holding power for the screw here. So wish me luck.